Who were your key mentors in blacksmithing?
Well, I've had a 50-year career. I've had, I think, 6 weeks of training. My first one was Dimitri Garikaris in New Hampshire. He was an early editor of the Angel's Ring, and he taught classes in New Hampshire. And I took a 2-week class from him in the middle of winter on Lake Winnipesaukee or something or other up there. He was trained in Germany, graduate of Dartmouth, and he really had a nice sense of design. If you go back in the old issues, I remember he took a lily and made a beautiful single-paneled gate out of it. Very inventive, big bear of a man. And then I worked with Francis Whitaker for 2 times. One was a workshop out west someplace. I don't really remember where. But the big one was at the Yellen Shop in the late 70s, where he and Jack Andrews invited the 6 or 7, how many? Let's see, it was more than that. Maybe 8 journeyman Smiths to come and spend 2 weeks at the Yellen Shop. And we had access to the library, to all of his samples, and we recreated a Yellen-esque gate. Each team, we worked in teams, and yeah, that was a wonderful experience. And that's it. The rest of it's been on my own. I see something, I like that. Let's see what I can do with that. I started doing demonstrations. I've done them from Colorado east, some up in De Pere, down south. I've taught at craft schools. And you learn a lot from teaching. Every time, I always would start with a hook because it's quick and relatively easy. It doesn't take a lot of skill. Except to make a nice hook, it does take a lot of skill. And so you can show the differences. So I always would start then, and we'd work up from that. I did every year in the 90s, I taught at the John C. Campbell folks. I did a master class after Francis didn't do it anymore. I did it, and then what's his name from Tennessee took over, and he's still doing it. I can get his name, but I can't get it right now.
Why did you choose to teach demos? Was it just natural for you being a teacher?
Yeah, I mean, teaching can be a very exciting profession. When you have something to share and the student has something they want to learn and you come together. I mean, it's like that on the Sistine Chapel, God reaching out with his finger and man, Adam over there with the, whack. I mean, it's, the lights go off and the sparks fly. It's grand. It's grand.
So in a way, I asked you about mentors, and here as a natural progression, you became a mentor
Yeah,
to people.
yeah. I love teaching. When I've got something to share, I mean, I can spout off about a lot of stuff and who cares, but when somebody wants to learn something and you've got the wherewithal, the vocabulary or the will or something to share it, I mean, what's better than that?
Was it helpful for your career to do demonstrations?
Uh, well, not in the obvious sense. What it does do is spread. I think it gets your name out there a little bit further. Uh, but you sort of have an obligation also to it. So it's a combination. I mean, I didn't take every job. You don't make any money. You get beer money. I mean, um, but you have an obligation to pass the craft on. I mean, look how old it is. You can just see the Egyptian priest taking moon rock and pounding it into a ceremonial dagger. It's the second oldest profession in the world.
What did you say the first one was?
Pottery.
Pottery.
Yeah. So that I used to make on leaves on a gate. I would take a couple of leaves and I'd make ladybugs and put them in there someplace, a little hidden. And I learned to make ladybugs from Bud Ogier, who was, at that time, maybe 40 years older than I am. And he learned to make them from some guy in Maine, or maybe he made it himself. But that progression of, so it's like in the early books of the Bible that so-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so. And so, yeah, I learned that from Bill Gichner. And Bill Gichler learned it from his dad. And his dad learned it from a German-trained smith by the name of X. That sort of gives you goosebumps. At least it gives me goosebumps.
I hope that's what we're doing here with this interview.
Yeah.
What was your favorite venue when you were doing demos?
My favorite
venue. Did you return? You said you went to John C. Campbell. Was there a place that you went back to that you really loved?
I went back to John C. Campbell for, I think it was 10 years. Mm-hmm. The only place I didn't get to that I would love to teach at was Haystack up in Maine. But I taught the New England Smiths, I don't know. You can only do so much. It's exhausting to be a teacher with 10 students and you're waltzing around, somebody saying here or here, overseeing it. And of course, they all want to work at night. So you got to go and work at night with them. And then you get rewarded with smiles and thanks and beer money. It's a little different if you can tie up with at one point I wanted to go back and get a degree in, a fine arts degree, because I thought that would give me a cachet and I could go to not UVA, well, maybe UVA, but VCU down in Richmond and teach the sculpture department. Look, you don't have to just arc it, weld it together. You can form this. You can take heat and bend it. It moves. It's alive, and I thought that would be good. But when I went to get my master's in arts, they wanted to know if I've had surface design. And I said, have you looked at my portfolio? They said, have you had surface design? Well, no, I hadn't had surface design. I didn't have a BA in arts or an MFA, a BFA. I didn't have a BFA. I wanted to get an MFA because I thought it was another check off in the thing, but I didn't get it, and I did fine without it.
What was a memorable experience during teaching blacksmithing, doing demos? What's a highlight that sticks out for you?
Well, a highlight is always when there's a aha moment, when they understand the relationship between this lump of iron at their end of the fist and the drawing or the idea that they have in their head. And when it comes close to what it should be, and they can then see the refinement, that moment of, well, it's the moment of understanding a theorem, how it works out. It's the moment of learning to do a drawing that conveys what's in your head for your client. So you now can both talk on the same page. It can come in many, many different ways. Yeah.
You mentioned Bill Gichner.
Yeah.
And you spoke of him as a mentor.
Right.
How did you guys meet? What did he mean to you?
There was a fair up in Maryland at Frederick. It was the Frederick Craft Fair every summer, and for a couple, I had a friend, Jeannie Drevis, and a couple of other people I knew. We would go up to the fair and hang out. And it was a party time. Then I would hump all my iron up there. And this guy came by. He had a Greek sailor's hat, and his pants were always falling down over his hips, and a black shirt. And he walked by my display, which wasn't big. Biggest thing I might have had was a bench. And the seventh time he went by, I said, "You must really like iron, And, just undeniable. But that was the start of it. I gave him a card. And then he used to make forays around the country. He'd get his van and he'd fill it with everything from hammerheads to handles to parts for power hammers. Always had a couple of boxes of books, whatever he thought he could sell. And that was his game. He didn't want to buy and sell so much as trade. He loved to trade. And he would drive all over the country. And I was sort of the first stop out. And then it got so he would ask me to go on trips with him. So we would drive around for a couple of weeks and stop at crazy places, wonderful places. And then he would call me every 2 or 3 weeks and say, "How are you doing? What you working on?" And then his last 2 questions were always, "How can I help? What do I have that would be helpful for you? A tool, book, something or other." And a lot of times, the book was he priced it at $250. Well, I didn't have $250 usually. And he would say something like, "This is a book you need." No, a book is a tool. Take the book, pay me when you can. And then he'd write it down in a book. Or it would be a tool for a special job. And he said, "Take this, try it. If it works, pay me when you can. If it doesn't work, I'll take it back." Who does that? He just wanted to get the right tool, book or reel, into the right person's hand so that the work went better. And he did that for hundreds of people. He set up a forge in the middle of the Navajo reservation. He set up one. He sent tooling for a place in Latin America. I mean, he would hate to be known as a generous person, but he was. When he died, they called me up because he had to be buried the next day. He had a little coterie of 4 or 5 friends, and they were all getting to there, and you met his son-in-law, and they would say, well, who's going to give the eulogy? So at 10:30 that night, they called me up and said, we decided you're giving the eulogy, and it'd have to be in Washington at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I wrote the eulogy and gave it. Anyway, he was a lot of people had a hard time with him, but I loved Bill. When he came, you've seen the shop in the plains. It has a little porch, and I would pull the rocker out, which I have downstairs, set it up. Bill would open the doors of the van. I'd go next door and get him a strawberry ice cream cone and sit him in the rocker while I went through the van. Did that for years.
How much older is he than you?
I really don't know. He's probably at least 15, or more like probably 20 years older. Yeah.
Why do you call him Uncle Bill?
Because he was like an Uncle Bill. Yeah. His father had a shop in the city, and his father used to install Yellen's work in the cathedral or at, what's that big estate up there on the hill. They did a lot of work together.
How about book mentors? People that wrote books, and do you have favorite books? Are there some that stick out? Maybe three?
Well, I used Albert Son a lot. I got through Bill. I got a set of originals, and they were great for inspiration. For my front door hinges on the forge are from that book. I had probably 15, maybe 20 books by, I should have a list of them and I could get one, but Fritz Kuhn. I use those books a lot. The Schmerler books from Austria. I learned to smith out of the Kosira books, the Council of Rural Industries from England. There were two on blacksmithing specifically, and I used those a lot. So Schmerler for tools, what to use, how to, beautiful books done in color. I didn't like his work so much, but it was too much. I called it, from Austria, Mitschlag with whipped cream, too sort of ornate, like Baroque. I like my work cleaner.
So, back to your career.
Excuse me.
Back to your career.
Okay.
You're pretty recognized now.
Mm-hmm.
When do you feel that you started to be recognized? And what led up to that?
I really am not sure. It might have been when it became known that I was doing work for the cathedral. That was certainly a big jump in my own career, in recognition, so that I would get architects to call. And, it was sort of like being stamped with the Good Housekeeping seal. Oh, he must be okay.
How did that make you feel?
Humble.
What year did they approach you?
It would be sometime in the early 80s. The phone rang one morning, and I always kept a notebook by the phone because I can't remember a name long enough to hang out. So the first thing I do is write down the name, and then I make sure I get the phone number. And this woman that was on the other end, she said, would you hold for the Canon? I'm thinking, what the hell is this? The Canon? Who's the Canon? And I said, I'm sorry, who is this? And she said, the clerk of the works for the National Cathedral. So I almost fell over, and I said, she sure, I'll hold. And because, the secretary has to call. And so he comes on the phone, very brusque, very businesslike, and says, this is Canon Feller, the National Cathedral. I'm calling because I wonder if you'd be interested in doing a gate for the columbarium. And I was dumbfounded. I literally struck dumb. And I said something stupid like, well, I'd have to charge design fees. He said, of course. Oh, well, that's over with. And so he said, I'd like to have you come in, and I'll show you what we need, and we can walk around. And so I did go in, and I had a Polaroid camera, and he would say, I like this. This works here. I'm not sure about this. Da 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 da. And this is what I want. And it was a tacky looking area. I mean, there was the yelling gate, and then there were no lights. Well, there were, but they didn't turn them on. And so you went up the stairs where the north and south columbarium are, and then the main columbarium to the west. And they had like a badly hung theater curtain, red pseudo velvet, and the trolley that it went on was like that. I mean, it was really the tackiest looking place to put Uncle Harry in. And we said, this is the first one. But let's start with one of the smaller ones. So that was how that started. And I agonized over the design. I did a lot of work, a lot of sketching. Actually, I did the sketching for the first gate one of the summers that I went down and taught the master class there. I'd get up early in the morning, and they had this long layout table, and I had this, what they call it, bumwad paper that architects use, and I just rolled it out, and I started scribbling on it. I still have part of that roll someplace, or had it. So I took it in, and I did a sample part. On big work like that, I always did. I took a part and made a sample of it full scale. And I took it into them, and it was too open. The first part was too much. It had 4 circles that were tapered. They were thin at the top, thick at the sides, thin at the bottom, and they all tied together with a leaf that had 4 tendrils that wrapped around the individual scrolls. It was really nice. It was light. It wasn't heavy, but you could put your hand through it. And they said, that's too light because we don't want you to be able to put your hand. I'm not sure if they were scared about who was coming out or who was going in, but so I never did that one. I always wanted to do that gate. I came back and designed another one, and I liked that, and so I started it, and then I did the second gate, so I did the 2 small ones, north and south, and then the last one I finished in, I don't know, 94, so on the big one.
When did you start the first gate?
It would have been back in the 80s, the late 80s. I don't really remember.
How long did each of them take?
I can only tell you the last one. The last one took 1,200 hours, which does not translate accurately into days because I would work on it and then I would stop and look at it and do something else and I would come back to it. But I did keep track of the hours. So
More than a year?
yeah, it took me more than a year. Yeah. The interesting thing about working for the cathedral that you weren't bidding. It wasn't like trying to build a rocket where you're bidding against your other competitors. So they want the lowest competitive piece. You were allowed to design your own, do the best you could, present it, fall flat in your face. They either liked it or they didn't like it. And if they didn't like it, they gave me a second chance. But so I designed the second piece. This was for the big gate. And I took it in, and it's pretty heavy. And I took it in and I put it on his desk, and he sort of sat back and he said, I think it's too heavy. I think the material is too much. And I said, well, I disagree with you, Canon. And I said, but let's take it downstairs and put it where it's meant to be. And so we did, and he backed off down the steps, and he said, you're absolutely right. And so what I learned from him is you work your best, and you're the expert on this material, and you stand up for your work. You show him why this is what you did. And he had the grace, unlike many architects, to back away from what he had figured was right. And that happened to me also with a big major architectural firm, that they backed away from their rather rectilinear and disappointing design. It was the Rockefeller Gate, to something that was much more creative and free-flowing and fit the locale. And that's the kind of symbiotic relationship that you strive for, and that it only occurs occasionally. And it was very gratifying because as the blacksmith, grit under your nails and torn pants and so on, you're the low man on the totem pole.
What was the biggest obstacle you faced with the cathedral gates, any of the gates?
Well, the scariest one was would it fit in the opening? And I got around that by taking a piece of plywood, a sheet of plywood, cutting it roughly, taking it down and scribing around the archway, cutting it back, coming back, cutting it exactly, taking it back in. Did it fit? Could it turn in there? And then building the gate to that. It's always, will it fit? Will it work? The big gate, we carried it in, we set it up. It's a pin that goes in the bottom. So you're setting up and that pin goes in the bottom. And then together at the top, it sits on top of a bar with a washer and a rivet, decorative rivet goes down through it. And then does it work? And that's a hairy moment. It only took 10 minutes to install each panel. It's so short that the video people said, you've got to do this again. And we missed it. So
you said big gate. How tall and wide and heavy is this?
Yeah, it took 4 men to carry it. And they were roughly 2-3 foot panels, 3.5, I don't remember. And they were pretty tall, 7 feet, 8 feet. I'm not sure.
So you had multiple panels.
I had 2 panels.
2 panels.
The big gate is 2 panels, 2 that open.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the name of that gate? The brown gate?
No, that's the side. That's the south columbarium.
Is it the one with the leaves?
It's begins with F, I think. It's not Forbes, not It'll come to me. I'll be
Okay.
thinking of something else.
So how did this change your career after you got the cathedral job, your overall career?
I didn't worry about a job again. Always had work. It allowed me. I had more room to experiment. People were more willing to let me. My designs were freer. Yeah, I had the good housekeeping stamped on my forehead.
So following your years in the plains, you retired in 2000.
Yeah, I guess it was
2000, 2001, something like that.
Yeah.
What led up to your retirement? Why did you decide to retire?
Well,